Ever get that feeling like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop? Like, especially when you're dealing with people, like you just know deep down there's got to be some kind of hidden motive behind their actions, or even like their inactions. And I think if you've ever dealt with any past trauma, that feeling can be like amplified like tenfold. So how do you actually deal with that fear, right? Like without turning into some kind of mind reader, or like needing to be a what's it called, an emotional intelligence guru or something. Well, that's actually what we're diving into today. We're dissecting this really insightful piece called Understanding Fear Behind Actions. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some tools to, help navigate those kind of tricky social situations. It's funny because just the other day, a coworker canceled a coffee catch-up. It's like last minute, right? And I have to admit, like, I totally spiraled. I was like, what did I do? Are they mad at me? Do they, like, secretly not like me?
Yeah.
Anyone else? But, this text, it would argue that it's not necessarily about them.
It's more about the lens that our past experiences kind of create. You know what I mean? And they actually use this fictional story about a woman named Mia to kind of illustrate this point. So basically, Mia gets laid off because of this decision her boss makes, right? And it's a decision that's, like, totally fueled by the boss's ego. But here's the thing. It's not even the job loss that really gets to me. It's the fear and the isolation that come after,
And it's so interesting how this source, it really highlights Mia's response to this whole thing, right? Like instead of getting angry, railing against the injustice of it all, she just kind of like shuts down, puts up walls. And it's not because she's cold or unfriendly. It's because she's trying to protect herself, from being hurt again. It's a defense mechanism.
That's such a good point because, yeah, like how often do we just jump to conclusions about someone being, I don't know, aloof or unfriendly when in reality they could be carrying all this like unseen baggage?
Exactly. And this is where the source material gets really, really interesting because it's saying, look, it's not about judging people's actions, just at face value. It's about understanding that what we might see as a threat, often it comes from our own history. It's not necessarily malicious intent from the other person.
Okay, so how do we actually apply that then? Like, how do we move from this everyone's out to get me mentality to something a little more, shall we say, balanced?
Well, the source, it dives into this with a section called, and I love this, Earbuds and Hidden Signals. And I have to admit, when I first saw that title, I was like, earbuds? What do earbuds have to do with any of this? But bear with me. Because this analogy, it's a little out there, I know. But it actually makes a lot of sense when you really think about it.
It's like, imagine you put in your earbuds, right? Suddenly, boom, you're tuned into this whole world that only you can hear. And yeah, there might be other people around, sure, but they're not picking up on those same frequencies. They're not getting the nuances, the subtle signals that, like, really mean something to you.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. So it's like someone's actions, they might seem off to us. Or even hurtful, but it's not necessarily about us, right? It's like their own song, their own internal experience that we're not really in on. Exactly. And that's where these 5 key takeaways from this piece really come in. It's like they're like little adjustments you can make to your earbuds, to get that signal crystal clear, to really understand where the other person is coming from.
Okay. All right. I'm into it. So hit me. What's number 1?
The first one is active listening as frequency tuning. And I know we hear about active listening all the time, but this source, it adds a really interesting layer to it.
Ooh, do tell.
Okay, so it's not just about hearing the words, right? It's about paying attention to the music behind them, like the tone, their choice of words, even like the silences, like picture this. Someone says, "I'm fine," but their voice is all tight, their shoulders are hunched up around their ears. Are they really fine? Active listening, it helps you tune into those little discrepancies,
Yeah.
the hidden signals.
So it's almost like you become like an emotional detective or something, looking for all those little clues to figure out what's really going on beneath the surface.
Precisely. And this actually leads perfectly into takeaway number 2. Patience and balance. Think of it like you wouldn't just crank your earbuds up to full volume without adjusting, right? It's the same with people. You don't want to overwhelm someone with your own assumptions or interpretation.
Especially someone who's already feeling like, vulnerable or triggered or something, right?
Absolutely. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that balance between empathy and objectivity. Like showing that you care, of course, but without, trying to fix them or jumping in with solutions before they're even ready to hear them.
Which, let's be real, it can be really tough.
Yeah.
especially if you're like, a natural fixer
Mm.
or you like to solve problems.
Yeah.
But sometimes the most helpful thing really is just listening and holding space for someone.
Exactly. And that holding space, it actually leads us to takeaway number 3, embracing vulnerability. Think of it like your earbuds, right? They adapt to all these different genres of music. Well, it's the same with people. Not everyone expresses themselves the same way.
Right, right. So be flexible. Be open to hearing things that maybe you don't really want to hear.
Yeah.
Seeing things from a different angle.
Yes. And don't be afraid to ask those clarifying questions like, what did you mean by that? Or can you tell me more about how that made you feel? Those questions, they show the other person, hey, I'm really engaged here. I'm actually trying to understand your experience, not just, waiting for my turn to talk.
Which brings us to takeaway number 4, exploring alternative perspectives.
Mm.
This one feels especially relevant, I think, when we're talking about those potential hidden motives, right? Because if we're like stuck in our own heads, trapped in our own assumptions, it's so easy to just jump to the worst case scenario every time.
Oh, 100%. It's like you've got those earbuds in, you're blasting your go-to pump-up song, right? And you just completely forget that, hey, other people, they might be listening to something totally different. They might be dealing with a totally different set of emotions, different experiences that are influencing their actions.
So, okay, how do we actually do that then? How do we break free from our own, I don't know, our own limited perspective?
Well, the source suggests asking like these what if questions, like what if this person's actions, they're not coming from a place of malice? What if it's like fear or insecurity?
Mm.
What if their silence, it's not a personal attack? What if they're just, processing their own emotions?
It's about choosing curiosity over judgment,
Right.
like giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when it's really hard.
Exactly. And this brings us to that final takeaway. And this one might be the most important one of all, self-awareness as the foundation.
Because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes,
No.
100%. If we're not even aware of our own baggage, our own triggers and all that, we're way more likely to project it onto other people. It's like if your earbuds are, I don't know, like dirty or they're broken or something, you're not going to get a clear signal no matter how hard you try.
So self-awareness is about acknowledging those past experiences, especially, I think, those traumatic ones. Because those experiences, they can create a filter almost, a filter that we view the world through. And sometimes, that filter, it gets a little distorted, and it can really distort how we see other people too.
And that's okay. That's totally normal. The important thing is that we're aware of it, aware of that filter, so that we can start to question our assumptions. And then, we can approach those interactions with more compassion, more understanding.
I love that. Okay, wow. We have covered so much ground here. We've talked about active listening, patience, embracing vulnerability, exploring alternative perspectives. Oh, and the crucial role of self-awareness. This is like a masterclass in navigating those really tricky social situations.
It's about, really equipping ourselves with the tools we need to feel safer,
Yeah.
more confident in those interactions, right? Especially when, that past trauma might be whispering those doubts in our ear.
Speaking of doubts and whispers and all that fun stuff, let's take a quick pause here just to gather our thoughts, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into how to actually apply all of this wisdom to our own lives. Don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we are back. We've been really diving deep into these 5 takeaways from, understanding fear behind actions. It's like we were just handed this incredible toolkit, right, for navigating all those murky waters of human interaction, especially I think when past trauma has us, constantly on guard.
And I think the biggest takeaway here really is that it is a process. Like it's not about instantly being, immune to fear or paranoia. It's more about building up those emotional muscles. It's about learning how to respond instead of just reacting.
So how do we do that then? How do we actually take all of this amazing advice and make it actionable? You know what I mean? Because it's one thing to, sit here and talk about active listening and exploring perspectives and all that. But let's be real, when you're actually in it, when you're feeling triggered and unsure about everything, it's so easy to just default back to those old patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes practice
Yeah.
for sure. And it's not always going to be perfect, right? But even those little tiny steps in the right direction, those can make a huge difference, trust me.
Okay, so what? Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're in that situation we were talking about earlier where your coworker cancels plans last minute. So instead of immediately going into that spiral, right? Like, what did I do wrong? Just try hitting the pause button for a sec.
Pause button.
Yeah. Literally pause, take a couple deep breaths, and instead of letting your mind, race ahead to all the worst case scenarios, just ask yourself, what's the most generous interpretation of this situation? Like, what's the kindest way to see this?
Whoa. Okay, that's good. So instead of assuming they cancel because they like secretly hate me, maybe it's maybe they're just having a bad day, or they're dealing with, I don't know, something personal and they just couldn't make it.
Exactly. It might not have anything to do with you at all. And even if it does, even if, you were somehow the reason, going into it with like curiosity instead of accusations, it's always going to be more productive in the long run.
This actually reminds me of something else the text mentioned about setting boundaries. It's not just about like protecting ourselves from other people, but it's also about kind of taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being too.
Yes. 100%. That is so important. And it's something people forget all the time. We can't control how other people act, right? Like that's part of life. But we can control how we respond to it. And sometimes that means like stepping back, creating some space for ourselves, prioritizing, our own mental health.
So if like a friend is constantly canceling plans, or like
Yeah.
a coworker is just consistently doing something that really triggers you, it's okay to set boundaries with them.
Absolutely. It's not about, like shutting people out or anything like that. It's about communicating your needs in a healthy way. Like,
Yeah.
it could be as simple as saying, hey, I was really looking forward to catching up, but, in the future, could you maybe just give me a little more notice if you need to reschedule?
Oh, see, that's such a good point. That is
Yeah.
so much better than just like stewing in silence and resentment.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that, healing from past trauma, it's not like a one and done kind of thing. It's not a destination. It's more like a journey. And there will be times when those old fears, those insecurities, they're gonna pop back up again. But I think each time we face them, you know, head on with compassion for ourselves and for the other person, it's like we strengthen our resilience that much more. We get a little bit closer to that place of peace.
Man, this whole deep dive has been such an eye opener. Seriously,
Yeah.
it's like instead of trying to like be mind readers,
Yeah.
or communication experts or whatever, it's more about understanding ourselves a little better,
Yeah.
like recognizing our own triggers, and then approaching all those interactions with a little more curiosity and compassion.
Yes. And remembering that everyone is fighting their own battles, Everyone is carrying around these invisible burdens. And sometimes all it takes is a little bit of kindness, a little understanding, and it can go such a long way.
I could not agree more. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dives here into understanding fear behind actions. We explored how past trauma can, really shape how we see the world, how to like navigate those tricky social situations with more confidence, more clarity, and I think most importantly, how to approach ourselves and other people with a little more grace.
It's been such a pleasure diving deep with you all.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring those hidden signals. Keep tuning into those frequencies that matter most. And remember, you are not alone on this journey.